Right, so we're joined via Zoom by international relations analyst, Professor Siphamandla Zondi, who is at the University of Johannesburg, perhaps to weigh in on the developments in the Russia-Ukraine war. As we speak, a very good afternoon to you, Prof. Thank you for your time with us here on the SABC.
Oh, hi, good afternoon, and good afternoon to the viewers as well.
Prof, I want to look at what transpired yesterday at the Ukraine-Russia dialogue held by the African National Congress. There were some utterances that obviously had been made by the Russian ambassador saying that there's no space for neutrality in a modern world. How do we begin to assess what the implications of those sentiments actually allude to at this point, given the dynamics unfolding in the Russia-Ukraine war?
A Russia that has become increasingly isolated from its traditional partners in the West, that has under pressure to succeed and all of that, would not wish that would be not support Russia in this war. Similarly, Ukraine and the West would wish that we would also support them. So there's pressure to support either side. In other words, there's a pressure to align with one side for one or the other reason. What South Africa, the African continent broadly, and the global South generally have chosen to do was that the best way to end this war is to align with a peaceful settlement of conflict, and therefore not perpetuate this conflict by supporting this or that side, but rather urge both sides towards a negotiated settlement. There's a historical position of Global South whenever there are geopolitical conflict involving the big powers competing over power. It has tended to recede to non-alignment, not neutrality, but non-alignment, which is to align with peace, align with a peaceful settlement to conflict. Because for smaller countries, weaker countries like us, peace is the best condition in which you can develop. War will lose a lot in wars. All small countries tend to lose when wars continue around the world.
Prof, the Ukraine and China missing from that conversation yesterday want us to question the efficacy of obviously what transpired, given the lack of voices on that front. We obviously anticipating a right of reply in regards to what transpired at that dialogue. But on the back of the package that also played before your interview, Belarusian president saying that the expansion of NATO at this point would in fact be an act of provocation. Your thoughts?
Yes, what would have been ideal in the conversation yesterday is if the countries that hold a different view, the countries that hold a view that we need to further militarize Ukraine, pumping more and more weapons of destruction of some form, for the right reason of defending Ukraine, which is the one that was invaded, to come and offer that view and argue that it is wrong to call for a mediated solution. It's wrong to call for a mature end to the war. It's wrong to call for a diplomatic solution, though that has been the legacy of the world for the last 80 years. And that is what has prevented wars or resolved wars all the time. And come and really make a strong view that the best way to end war is a military victory by one side or the other, and that this will not lead to a defeated country building itself up to revenge over a period of time. It would have been good to have that view that says war is a solution too, and that peace is not the only solution. It would have been really ideal.
So, Prof, we have to now obviously look at all of this happening in the context of a shifting geopolitical landscape. Perhaps from the weekend up until today, how do you think the dynamics have shifted in terms of the Ukraine-Russia war and what's set to transpire? We've got that BRICS summit underway, a change of venue being discussed. Obviously, whether Russian President Vladimir Putin will be able to leave his country given the mutiny at the weekend. There's obviously also issues about the peace talks that have also been led by African leaders at this point and how that will impact going forward. How do you begin to put all these pieces of the puzzle together and make sense of it?
You put it very accurately. These are shifting pieces of the puzzle, and we have to be very careful about making definitive statements about how these are going to pan out. But definitely, the rebellion in Russia did affect a lot of dynamics. One of that had put Russia in the spotlight, and put the spotlight also the ability of Russia to act in a united fashion. Put on the spotlight questions in respect of whether President Putin can keep all of this together. The leadership, now that was the Minister of Defense and the military generals were under attack by the Wagner group that wanted them to be removed, partly because they were not providing sufficient support for the war in Ukraine, because the Wagner group wants to defeat Ukraine. So those dynamics do complicate things, because there are some who think that maybe somehow the Wagner group was going to weaken the Russian war in Ukraine, when actually the Wagner group was asking for escalation of that war, strengthening of that war. They're looking for defeat of Ukraine. Now, when the two groups are fighting, it might have something to do with the weaknesses within the Russian system, but it does not change the outcomes of the war on the ground. One was very surprised that the Ukrainians were not able to take advantage of that in our fighting among the Russians and escalate their counteroffensive, but nothing actually moved. But now what we now have is that the Wagner group leader is in the north of Ukraine, and is in a stage that has not supported Ukraine, Belarus, and that creates a possibility that there's now a northern flank to Ukraine's challenges. Because the Wagner group is committed to Russia and to Russia's strategy, to the Russia's survival and all of that. And that creates a dynamics that are very hard to interpret, because it just does not make sense that a rebellion that looks like it's successful would simply end on the basis of a decision by the rebels that were looking like they were successful. It seems like there's a whole of strategy taking place here. But definitely we have not fully understood how united Russia is in its fight for survival.
No, absolutely, Prof. These are some of the questions coming to the fore. Speaking on the issue of the Wagner Group at this point, their presence in Africa, the benefits or non-benefits for African, for countries, state and non-state actors at this point. Some questions about human rights violations. Do you think that more needs to be done, perhaps, to assess the relationship of them going forward on the continent, the AU's response after the weekend's mutiny, or their silence? How would you also begin to weigh in on that? Perhaps as Africa aims to also restore its agency somewhat in the global sphere.
Our challenges and implications for us from the rebellion of last weekend have to do with this one element as well in this rebellion. At the end of the rebellion seems like the end of Wagner Group. For one simple reason, the soldiers have now been absorbed in the Russian army. The leader of the Wagner Group has now been moved to Belarus, which is where some of the nuclear weapons of Russia has moved. Now, which then means that the Wagner Group's operations all over, often in support of the Russian state, but also as part of the business of private military corporations, such as in parts of Africa, simply now moves from a Wagner command to a Russia command. Now, it then puts Russia under pressure to make sure that in all of these operations, it does not harm the relationship between Russia and Africa. And I guess with the upcoming Russia-Africa summit that is coming in a couple of weeks' time, these issues will be on the table, because partly, in some cases, the Wagner Group is, as a company, hired by African authorities or African actors to assist them in their situation. But it's now going to be in the spotlight. And Russia would be hard-pressed to make sure that it operates ethically, that it doesn't undermine the AU principles, doesn't undermine democracy, doesn't undermine good governance and all of those things, but it strengthens the state. Until we have international agreement in relation to how we deal with mercenaries, I know for a fact that a number of countries, including Russia and Western powers, resisted the development of guidelines at the UN Human Rights Council for private military cooperation because they own a number of these private military contracts, all these big countries in the East and in the West, and that's a problem.
So, Prof, we're obviously going to continue to look at the developments unfolding because, again, more questions are coming through as the discussions unfold. But we'll leave our conversation there for now. Thank you for your time with us on the SABC. Professor Siphamandla Zondi from the University of Johannesburg.